None. Please welcome Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here today in this beautiful part of the state. I actually, before I became a congresswoman, I had the opportunity to cycle all of California. And I always recall that this was great, especially when it wasn't raining. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. I want to begin by acknowledging that I have a guest here today with me, and that would be Jack, my husband.
Hey, Jack.
Jack served this country 22 years in the U.S. infantry. He is a retired colonel from the United States Army. Okay, so there's a couple things that I want to do today in my talk, and that is, first of all, tell you a little bit about myself, and secondly, tell you what I've been working on in the Congress, and then hopefully we'll have a little time to take some questions. So my parents are immigrants from Mexico. They met each other in Los Angeles and ended up getting married. They moved to Anaheim. Anaheim is my hometown, where Disneyland is. I know we've had a lot of Rotary conventions down there. My parents came because they needed an opportunity. Each of their fathers died when they were when they were young, and so they came to this country seeking what a lot of immigrants do. Met, married, went to Anaheim, had 7 kids. Even though my parents had a little education, they ensured that all of their children were educated. And we have graduates from Stanford and Berkeley and USC and UCLA and all over the place. So I think from that standpoint, my parents were very successful. While we were going to university, my mother actually went back to school, got her GED, her AA, her BEA, and then she became a public school teacher for 17 years, teaching other people's children. By the way, my mom and dad are the only parents in the history of these United States to send 2 daughters to the United States Congress.
Oh, wow.
I'm a Head Start child. That means that I came from a low-income background because Head Start is the program started by President Johnson to get preschool for children who otherwise wouldn't get it. And actually, the very first year of Head Start was the year that I was in. And I'm on the front page of my hometown newspaper as the first kid in Head Start. And this past July, we celebrated 50 years of Head Start. And I was asked to do the TED Talk on why Head Start is so important for our country. And you can look it up on YouTube. Public school kid, I went to college on a federal Pell Grant, on a California State Grant A, and on a student loan. And my MBA was paid for by the Rotary Club of Anaheim. I'm an International Foundation Scholar and went to school in Rome, Italy. I'm also a Rotarian. When you have that kind of a background, you understand how important it is to be in the civic club and to give back to community. I was an investment banker, financier, for 12 years before I went to the Congress. And actually, for part of that, lived up in San Francisco and worked, had a practice there for Booz Allen and Hamilton. My specialty in the beginning was infrastructure financing. Then I did private placements, I worked on some merger deals, I did international work. And then I moved back to Anaheim. And I moved back to Anaheim because my grandmother was getting old and I wanted to spend time with her. She was at my mom and dad's house. But I had a lot of time on my hands because when you do finance, as many of you know, it's a transactional situation. So you work hard on a deal, you get paid, then you can decide to take up another deal, or you don't, you take some time off. I'd done the traveling that I had wanted to do, and I said to my mom, Mom, what should I do now? And my mother said, I think that you should go back to the schools in Anaheim and ensure that the kids there are getting the skills that they need to be able to be as successful as you have been. I was a pretty smart mom. And so I did that. And I changed really what was going on in the schools, in the junior high and high school. And then I went to the school board and I said, hey, I can do this for you guys. We need to change all of them. You have 20 schools. No, change. It was so difficult for people to do. Weren't really interested in doing that. I talked to the mayor, who happened to be a friend of mine, and he said, you know, city doesn't really get involved in education. You should talk to your member of Congress. And I went to talk to my member of Congress, and he refused to meet with me.
Wow.
Wow.
And so I went home and I said to my family, I'm going to run for Congress. And I did, and I won. And now I've been in the Congress, this is my 20th year. Full disclosure, I am a Democrat in Republican Orange County. And they have continued to return me each and every election. So what do I do in the Congress? I sit as one of the top Democrats, number 2 for the Democrats, on both the Armed Services Committee and the Homeland Security Committee. And because of my mathematical background, my science background, and because I was young when I got to the House, I did all the technical things that the military does, right? So national missile defense, nuclear armament, disarmament, proliferation, non-proliferation, weaponization of space, chemical and biological attack. Everything that is scary, that is what I do. And on Homeland Security, after it was set up, after 9/11, Nancy Pelosi put me on the committee and she said, you're the one that understands counterterrorism. I was the one that had been working on that issue in the military committee. She said, protect California. And so that is what I have been working on for the past 20 years. Some of the things you may not know, for example, just this past weekend, I am the voting member for the Congress in the NATO Parliament group. So NATO nations are our most important strategic alliance. Most people believe that the presidents and prime ministers, should something occur, have this get together and have this emergency vote, and away they go, right? Lockstep and trying to do something. Let's say Article 5. Somebody attacks one of the NATO members, we decide, well, we have to protect them. But the reality is, it's a very gray area as to how that really works. Because for a lot of countries, the parliament has to make that decision, not the executive of that country. For example, remember when we were looking at Syria, and England's parliament took a vote, the prime minister wanted to go in and said so on behalf of his country, and the next day the parliament took a vote and said, don't you dare. So having that connection of the parliament and members understanding what's going on in NATO is one of the assignments that I have. And so the Republicans control the House and the Senate, but they send me and they place me as the voting member for that vote. And why would that be? Well, they know that I know everybody. And in July, the Congressional Quarterly, that is the established journal of the Congress, named the 25 most powerful women in the Congress. Republicans and Democrats, senators, House members. And it put me on that list. And it said two things, aside from all the credentials I have in security and homeland and intel and military. It said, Loretta Sanchez knows how to shape the debate. She knows how to talk to people and get them to the table. And the second thing is, she knows how to call the votes, how to get those swing votes people need to pass things. And I believe this is the reason why when I go to NATO, I'm the one in the room moving and trying to find those votes. In the same way I do it there, I do it in the House of Representatives and with our senators. Okay, what other things aside from military? And I've done major issues on the military. The military has the largest budget. I mean, that's the department with the most discretionary funds that the Congress has to move and deliver. And so in some ways it's the most powerful place to be, because within that defense budget, I will tell you that in 53 years, we have always moved a defense bill every single year. You cannot say that about health, you cannot say that about transportation, you cannot say that about veterans. And a single standalone, let's move that budget, the military budget always moves. And that means that there's a lot of power if you know how to move that and how to fund different pieces of that. I work on a lot of other issues because I have a background in business and finance. Some of the issues that I work on, for example, I started the Regulatory Reform Caucus. So we do our work on committees, and then we have caucuses. And of course, we're generalists. Every issue that comes before the Congress, it could be all the way from what's going on with doctors to national missile defense to privacy, everything. We were generalists. But we become experts on our committees if you're sitting there long enough and you understand what's going on and you're interactive with it. But we also, if we have other issues that we want to work with, aside from being able to cross across and get others on that committee to work with us, we can also set up caucuses. So I set up the Regulatory Reform Caucus. And it's the caucus that takes a look at dumb regulations that have put in place and really shouldn't be there, and we should work to eliminate. One of the bills, for example, that just went through the House and now is over on the Senate side is the menu labeling, the common sense menu labeling bill that I am working on with Mick Morris, who is from Washington, is a Republican. We just passed it in the House, and now we're working on it in the Senate, and I believe that we will pass that. So that's that's simply saying that small businesses shouldn't have to spend money to put up menu labeling boards if what they really are is a grocery store and maybe they have 2 or 3 products that get heated in the microwave. If the way that the FDA wrote those rules, it's telling them that they have to spend a whole lot of money to put up the amount of calories and other issues going up on that. So I believe that that will pass. Another area that I've worked really hard on, remember where I come from, Orange County, California, and we have the housing industry. Right? We have the building industry, we have the mortgage banking industry. So this whole issue of housing and affordability of housing and the supply side of housing and how we ensure that people have an opportunity to put a roof over their heads. So we've worked on home loans even before the housing crisis came, because I came out of the financial community. I could see what was going on. I mean, when my gardener buys a $600,000 home and I can't even afford that, it tells me something. So we started putting these Know Your Note forums in our area and asked people to come on in and bring their pile of closing documents, right? Because you know this. Everybody signs on the dotted line, but nobody knows what it says in there. Unless you're a lawyer and you really take the time to read what you're signing away. So we told people, bring in your paperwork. And we had banks there, and we had experts there, and for free, we would review before the housing crisis started. And say, this is a subprime loan, let's move them out of that. Can you really afford it? And there were at least about 50 people, every one of those forums, that we were able to move out of an escalating loan or something of the sort and get them into a product that allowed them, through this whole housing crisis, to hold on to their homes. Those forms went from hold on to your home and change that note to, oh my God, here's the foreclosure issue coming up, to, oh my God, you're going to have tax consequences for short sales, to, okay, there are shysters out there and this is the way you protect yourself from people who are selling and reselling a home that you no longer even own, for example. So we have worked very closely with our housing industry to ensure that we could work and get people through the process at whatever point was going on with respect to that. Let me end there, because I know we don't have a lot of time and there might be some questions to be asked. I mean, I'm a Rotarian, so I know that I'm not supposed to talk about my Senate race here per se, but if you ask me a question, I'll try to answer it. Yes?
Your comments with your position in Homeland Security on Apple and the FBI and the phones.
Sure. So, I think that we can all agree, it's been pretty standard, that law enforcement should go to a court and get a warrant to be able to get information off of phones or other instruments. And historically, Apple has worked with the FBI and the federal government when we have asked for that. This situation is completely new ground in some ways. Before, with these iPhones, there was a way to go in and get this information. But under the new operating systems, one of the things that Apple did was effectively, in order to be able to ensure that hackers and others wouldn't get in to their systems, they didn't build a back door, or they didn't put in a lock where they had a key to move it open. And so this is new ground. The question is, does the federal government have the right, going before a judge, have the right to tell you, well, you don't have a way to get in, but you have to make a way to get in? That is, in essence, new ground. So when we look at the court system addresses very narrow finding of one case before it. But this is a whole area of new issue area. And who is best able to decide the policy implications of that? And I would say to you, it is the Congress. Why? Because we have the staff, the money, the investigative powers, the policy powers to take a look at the effects of requiring that. Apple is arguing, for example, if the federal government tells us, make a system that opens this operating system up, what happens when China comes to us as a country and says, your phones are in our country, we want the key to get into people's phones? For good reasons, or for example, for human rights issues against their people, right? So Apple is arguing we're all safer from hackers and from other countries and entities if there is no way to get into information on that. I believe that those types of implications are so important for us as a country and as people that we should actually have the Congress take a look at all of those policy implications and then come up with a statute to be able to decide. So what Apple has done, as they're pushing back on the warrant from the court with these issues in front of them. And I believe that they have the right to do that, and that they should do that, because these policy implications have not been defined yet. They've not been, and it can open up a whole new can of worms. And again, the court is not the best situated to take a look at these series of issues. The Congress is. Yes.
Yeah, I work with the VA and a lot of the disabled vets, and you said you were talking with about the housing industry down in Orange County, and as a congressperson, woman, at the federal government, just wondering why California has not done what 4 other states have done, Illinois being the latest one. As of Wednesday, the governor signed that the disabled vet, the 100% disabled vet, does not have to pay property tax. California is not one of the other states that have done that. I wonder why has Congress, I mean, you're talking about a disabled vet, 100% disabled vet. There can't be that many of them around, okay? There's not that many soldiers, okay? There's not that many disabled vets around. So why hasn't Congress gone into something like that to assist the disabled, the 100% disabled, and probably not even a small percentage of them even own homes for that? Right, Illinois and 3 other states.
Well, I'll begin,
has, you know,
I'll begin to answer your question by saying it's a state issue. Property tax is not a federal property tax.
But you said you were involved with the housing industry as a
Yes, as it
congresswoman.
relates
Okay.
to what we can pass. I'm just saying that with respect to the property tax, the property tax is a local and state tax. It's not a federal tax.
But the veterans were federal. The
I
veterans are not
understand that.
state.
But it's like saying, it's saying this, it's saying that he owns a home and he charges rent. And I come over and say, why are you charging them so much rent? Well, that's a contract going that way. I don't insert myself in it. So the property tax, that's why you're seeing governor by governor making that, because it is a state tax, a state property tax that is going on. So that issue actually would be resolved in Sacramento. It wouldn't be at the federal level, even though they have a designation of a veteran because they fought for the national
And
military.
the state. I mean, they try,
I
it just
understand
seems
what you're
like
saying, but
the
that
political
property
people
tax-
try to, define a veteran, right? We fight for
Right.
everybody, right? We don't fight just for the feds, we fight for everybody. Everybody in this room, you and your husband's done the same thing, okay? So I mean, I just
But the
find out that
property
everybody
tax is
tries
done
to
at the state
deflect it and say, belongs to these people, I'm sorry.
It's a state tax.
Okay, it's a state thing. And then state becomes county and all this other.
What do you think, Congresswoman, of Jackie Spear, our Congresswoman? Any comments on Jackie?
Well, first of all, heroic story there. I mean, very heroic story. Being a staffer in Jonestown and everything, I mean, left her for dead. An amazing story, a personal story. She sits on the Armed Services Committee with me, and on some issues, we have worked together. On some issues, we have not worked. We have actually been on opposite ends. But, I think in the long run, she'll be, very capable member of Congress. And she's a big fighter on a lot of issues. Like I said, some I agree on and some I don't. But, I enjoy her as a colleague.
Last question.
With your vast experience in national security, give us a little insight in what you think are the most pressing issues we confront on the national security stage. And also, just for frame of reference, where you most agree with the Obama administration, and then what issue do you most disagree with the Obama administration?
Well, I think if you're looking at the security of America and Americans, in the long run, it's getting this issue done in the Middle East. And we can't, one thing that I agree with, I have been at odds sometimes with President Obama on his foreign policy, or lack of defining what it is that we're really doing, to tell you the truth. But on one thing that I do agree with him, and we haven't done effectively and we need to, is that the Middle East is not just our problem, okay? The neighborhood countries have to get to the table and they have to decide that they want to fix this problem. Because we cannot send our military to compete in Iraq for 10 or 11 or 12 years and then move them out and then have it fall apart again and have a bigger problem on our hands. We are not, we are not mercenaries to be sending our military in countries just to keep things together. But the Middle East is an area where we need to worry about keeping things together. So that, I think, in the long term is our biggest #1 national security issue. I used to put Iran ahead of that, but now that we have this Iran deal, it slipped to #2 for me on there, because there are possibilities with it. Might we have to confront that in the not too distant future? Maybe. And we have to prepare for that also. So that's why that would be #2 on my list. In the short term, let us not kid ourselves in that this internet radicalization issue that could happen, as it did in San Bernardino, could happen again. That's a much more difficult arena to handle, but we must. Third on my list, cybersecurity. That's why this Apple issue is incredibly interesting at this point. Cyber, we are throwing a lot of money at cyber in a lot of different ways, but everybody's kind of, it's such a vast and difficult and scary problem, to tell you the truth, that the right hand may not be telling what the left hand is doing. In some cases it's duplication, in some cases we don't even know if that's going to work. So this issue of cyber is very high on my list as far as national security. And let me just put in and end with this on that question. Our military is the best equipped, best trained, best educated military the world has ever seen. And so we continue to go to it. It's a tool. It's something that we use. But we continue to go to it all the time as a country and think that our military can solve our problems. And as somebody who is from a military family, on May 6th of this year, in a couple months, our youngest son is going to graduate and be commissioned as a second lieutenant in U.S. Army Artillery. As a military family, I will tell you that our families, our military families, have borne the brunt of everything that has happened in the last 15 years. And they're tired. My military men and women tell me all the time, we'll go, Congresswoman. We'll do our best and we'll do what you tell us to do. But we can't be using them all the time. It can't be what we pull out of the hat each and every time. There have got to be other means in which we handle the conflicts and the friendships that we have around the world. And as your next U.S. Senator, I will tell you, nobody understands what we need to do and how we can do it better than someone who's been at the helm of it for 20 years.
Dave has another question, but he'll catch it afterwards.
Yeah,
Okay, Dave? Thank you very much. Again, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're going to do our raffle.